4 HBCU players will be representing in the Super Bowl this year, the biggest stage in all of sports, if you ask me. 3 of those guys are on the active roster. 1 will actually be starting on defense, and we have a guy representing on the practice squad. This is the HBCU NFL Report on HBCU Game Day, keeping you guys updated on all of your favorite Black college football stars in the pros this week in the Super Bowl. I am Symone Stanley, as always, joined by Luke. Luke, how are you feeling?
Doing fine. Looking forward to what I think should be a great game once the Super Bowl kicks off in a couple of weeks.
So Thanos said in the famous Marvel movie Endgame, balanced as all things should be. And right now we are balanced because we have 2 HBCU players representing on the Eagles, my team. Y'all know I've been repping them all season long. And we have 2 players representing the Kansas City Chiefs. So I'll start with my birds. Javon Hargrave has helped lead us to the biggest stage in all of sports. Hailing from South Carolina State University, he's in his 3rd season with the Birds. He's been starting and digging graves all season long on the defensive line. Latest up was the San Francisco 49ers, who we faced in the NFC Championship. We took them down 31-7. Javon Hargrave had a sack. He also had 2 tackles and a pass breakup. So he's representing South Carolina State University. That's 1 for the MEAC. We're going to be keeping total here. Also from the Eagles, we have McCain, a 2nd-year defensive back out of North Carolina A&T, a 3.36 board. So this is going to count as 1 for the MEAC too, Luke, because A&T has since moved on. But when Mac was playing at A&T, they were part of the MEAC. So that is 2 MEAC products, both representing the Eagles in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, big ups to the MEAC. Obviously, to get we're going to find out not just 2 players. There's 1 more that actually played in the MEAC. But for the Eagles, those 2 that you mentioned, certainly Javon Hargrave, I would think he is certainly an All-Pro in that he had his first double-digit sack season, 11 sacks for the Eagles this year. So I would think that Javon Hargrave earned All-Pro status. He's only behind Chris Jones in terms of defensive tackles. I think 1 other guy that's in front of him in terms of double-digit sacks in the league. I think he earned the All-Pro. I think the Eagles will be crazy to let him go. He's been a key part of their lineup all year, their defensive lineup. McCain, on the other hand, has spent the entire season just about on the practice squad. And I actually saw his father. You know, McCain is the grandson of his legendary grandfather was one of the Greensboro 4 who sat in at the Woolworth's lunch counter on February 1st, 1960. He is the grandson of Franklin McCain. His father is the son of Franklin McCain. So McCain has a lot of history that goes with him. Now, one thing that father told me at A&T's homecoming this year, he said, Mac's not getting any games, but they haven't cut him, so they must like something about him. And I did see some photos of McCain and the family, a big contingent of family members celebrating because he is going to the Super Bowl. Even if he doesn't play, he's on the roster. We'll probably get a ring if they win. And I know that's not an if as far as Symone is concerned.
Don't start, Luke.
If they get a win, he will get a Super Bowl ring, which would be that would be a big feather in the cap of McCain. But like his father said, he stayed on the team this long for a reason. He's actually been healthy. I think his father said, I talked to him around mid-October, late October. So he's celebrating. He's wearing his Eagle stuff as the rest of his family is. And I'm sure it's the same for Javon Hargrave. Big accomplishment to be going to the Super Bowl, certainly in his 7th year in the league for Javon Hargrave. And as you said, McCain in only his 2nd year. So kudos to that. But as you said, 2 MEAC players.
So on the AFC side, we have 2 more players representing HBCUs. Give us a little recap.
Yeah, and this is very interesting from the standpoint that all year we've not really followed one of them. One of them we followed all year. He's Joshua Williams, defensive back for the Kansas City Chiefs. He was the first guy taken out of the HBCU ranks in the 2022 NFL draft out of Fayetteville State. Big, tall, 6'3", 205-pound defensive back. He played in 17 games for the Chiefs this year, and he did have an interception during the year, and then had a big interception in the playoff game against Cincinnati, where he teamed up with another guy, and this is the guy we didn't follow all year. He's Bryan Cook out of Howard University. He spent his first 2 years at Howard for the Bison before he transferred back home, where he's from, Cincinnati, Ohio, to play for the transferred back to Kansas City, and he goes against the game on Sunday. He goes against his hometown team, the Cincinnati Bengals, and he made a big play on a Joe Burrow pass. He knocked the ball in the air. Joshua Williams was trailing the play. He knocked the ball in the air out of T. Higgins' hands, and Joshua Williams pulled it in for a big interception in the fourth quarter, a deep pass from Joe Burrow. So the two rookies, both rookies, Bryan Cook was taken in the second round by the Chiefs. Joshua Williams was taken in the fourth round, but Joshua Williams has actually been playing more than the second round pick, Bryan Cook. But we're going to include him in the HBCU arena because he played 2 tough years at Howard. He came out of high school, was only recruited by Howard. That was the only offer that he had. And by the time he was a senior at Cincinnati, he was playing in the national championship game as the Cincinnati played against Alabama a couple of years ago. Against Georgia in the national championship game. So those two rookies will be on the field for the Kansas City Chiefs. That's a great accomplishment for these guys, both of them from the HBCU ranks. And as you said, Bryan Cook, if we add Howard to the list of South Carolina State as well as A&T, that's the third MEAC player that will be in this year's Super Bowl. And one from the CIAA, Joshua Williams from Fayetteville State.
So 4 players in the Super Bowl from HBCUs. 3 played in the MEAC. We had 1 play in the CIAA. I like the Division II representation here. I like that Joshua Williams is not only putting on for the CIAA, but D2 football.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we're not going to leave the SWAC out, Lou, because we have a little nuggie. An OG SWAC representative was on the field during the Kansas City Chiefs AFC celebration.
Yeah, and it was great to see. This guy is a legend. He's a Pro Football Hall of Famer, and they had him as their honorary captain for the championship game, the AFC championship game. His name is Emmett Thomas. He played at Bishop College, which is now a defunct university, but it was one of the founding schools of the Southwestern Athletic Conference, the SWAC. They were a member of the SWAC from the 1920s, the early 20s to the 1950s, and they were a prominent school in the SWAC. And Emmett Thomas came out of there, and he was one of 13 HBCU players for the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl IV when the Chiefs defeated the Minnesota Vikings. In fact, in that game, Emmett Thomas had an interception, and he's in the Hall of Fame because he had interceptions, which is still a Chiefs record. And Emmett, after he retired, was an assistant coach for the Atlanta Falcons. At one time, actually was an interim head coach for the Atlanta Falcons. Then he joined the Chiefs as a defensive backs coach. But to have him and to see him on the stage, I'm a little old in the tooth myself, but I remember when Emmett Thomas, he was one of the best defensive backs in all of the NFL. And again, in that Super Bowl IV that went over Minnesota, 13 HBCU players. We're talking about 4 between 2 teams.
Right.
There were 13 HBCU players just on the Kansas City Chiefs. And they included people like names that you've probably heard. Otis Taylor from Prairie View A&M, who should be in the Hall of Fame. Buck Buchanan, who is in the Hall of Fame out of Grambling. Willie Lanier, who is in the Hall of Fame out of Morgan State. Jim Marcellus, who should be in the Hall of Fame out of Tennessee State. And they had some other guys whose names you may have heard, like Nolan the Nat Smith. He was a kick returner for the Kansas City Chiefs back in the day out of Tennessee State. Goldie Sellers, a wide receiver out of Grambling, was also in that game. But 13 HBCU products, 7 out of the SWAC. in Super Bowl IV. And, one of these days we're going to do the real history to tell, just how impactful HBCU players have been in the history of so-called the greatest game and the biggest event in all of American college sports. And we call it, you better recognize the impact and the influence of HBCU players on the history of the Super Bowl. But as it is now, we got some other history I know you want to get to, because we have something happening in this Super Bowl that's never happened before.
Okay. I like the transition. Doing it for me, Lou. I appreciate it. So this is the first Super Bowl ever where two black quarterbacks will be going at it. So that's a win for all of Black America, because at the end of the day, win or lose for my birds, I guess I'll have a win, because a black quarterback will be hoisting the trophy at the end of the day. Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
And we know Patrick Mahomes is mixed, but Patrick Mahomes has self-identified several times. He's described himself as a black quarterback. And even when the players were protesting and asking Roger Goodell, I believe it was last year, it might have been the year before, but it was around the whole George Floyd situation, when they were asking Roger Goodell to denounce racism, Patrick Mahomes was one of those players on that video. So we fully claim him. He fully claims us. I've been seeing some people in the comments on Instagram. But that's all I have to say. But what a win, Luke, because it's only been 4 black quarterbacks to ever win the Super Bowl. No, 3 black quarterbacks to ever win the Super Bowl. Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, and Doug Williams, an HBCU Nugget.
Yeah, well, it'll be 4 this year, because either way, one of them is going to win the game, or at least one of the team is going to win the game. But yes, great accomplishment. And, Doug Williams is the guy that broke the mold when he won the Super Bowl playing with the what was then the Washington team that's now called the Commanders. He set Super Bowl records, was a Super Bowl MVP for his performance in that game. So they've been talking to Doug this week, talking about what it means to have the 2 black players. They asked him to pick one. He said, I can't lose either way, because the history of this whole thing about black players playing quarterback, for many years, if you played quarterback at the college level, if you were black, when you came into the NFL, they switched you to defensive back or wide receiver, usually those 2 positions. And it was quite a bit, and there was a lot of history about Eddie Robinson comparing not only Doug Williams, but James Shaq Harris to come into the NFL and to play quarterback and not play any other position, no matter what the coaches and the personnel tried to get them to do. So it's great. It's a great accomplishment. I think it's also indicates that not only are you going to see 2 in the Super Bowl this year, but it says that those quarterbacks who are athletic, who can run the ball as well as throw the ball, that's the future of quarterback play in the NFL. And certainly Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes constitute that in terms of guys that can move around, can avoid the rush, can run the ball if they need to. Obviously, Mahomes on one leg made a big run this past week that led them to their win over Cincinnati. So mobile quarterbacks, of which HBCU quarterbacks and black quarterbacks have traditionally been, have now proven that they can lead the teams, manage the games if necessary, make plays to win the games if necessary, and that's certainly the case with Jalen Hurts as well as Patrick Mahomes, the 2 H's.
The subtle disrespect, Lou, don't think I'm not picking up on it. Because last time we talked, you described our opponent as the dangerous 49ers. We'll be playing the Eagles. Now I hear it, I'm picking up on it.
Yeah. Well, no, I got nothing but love for the Eagles. And I haven't even figured out yet who I'll be rooting for. I almost feel like Doug Williams, that it's a win in either case, whether Mahomes wins and his team wins or whether Hurts' teams win. But I know how you're going. I know which side you're going to be on. I already know that.
It's only one winning scenario for me, and Patrick Mahomes already got one. Let's spread the rings around, spread the love around. Come on now. But Luke, one thing I noticed. One thing I noticed. Let's talk about the Carolina representation, because it's a lot of HBCUs, but North Carolina A&T, South Carolina State University, Fayetteville State. You got one Northern HBCU in Howard. The Carolinas been pumping out and producing this talent, Luke. They keep saying go to Texas.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's the reason why we mentioned history in terms of when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl 4, how many players they had, because there's certainly been a shift. You know, early in the history of the NFL and black players in the NFL, the majority of them were coming from the SWAC, as it indicated by the 7 that were on the Super Bowl 4 winning team. Even the Pittsburgh Steelers, when they were winning Super Bowls, they had 11, I think 9. We won 4. You know, I'm sorry, we won 6. But in the early days, we won 4, and we always had a boatload of HBCU players, and many of them were from the SWAC, like L.C. Greenwood out of Arkansas Pine Bluff, Mel Blount out of Southern. We had just a plethora of guys, and they were primarily from the SWAC. Over the last decade, the MEAC, you know, not even talking about what they've done in the Celebration Bowl, what they've done in the MEAC SWAC Challenge in terms of going up against SWAC schools, but even in terms of the number of players they're putting in the NFL, for the last decade, the MEAC has put more players than the SWAC or the SIAC or the CIAA for that matter. And I've talked to Doug Williams about this and others, and he's given me some clues because he's been a personnel guy as well as James Shaq Harris in the NFL. And they've talked about that the MEAC coaches were much more adept at sending the right kind of film to the NFL, to the NFL teams in the NFL, and that the SWAC was kind of behind in that. And Doug is a SWAC guy. He played at Grambling, as did James SWAC Harris. So he really was admonishing that the SWAC folks, you just can't send tape to the NFL. You have to send a certain kind of tape, and you have to send it to the right people. So I did a story a couple of years ago about why the MEAC was having more players in the NFL. And certainly, as you said, North Carolina is full of MEAC and has been historically full of MEAC as well as CIAA schools. And a lot of these kids now, like we're talking about in the Super Bowl 4 back in the early 70s, you know, Morgan State wasn't in the MEAC. They were in the CIAA. A lot of teams that eventually around 1970 that moved from the CIAA to the MEAC when the MEAC was formed in 1970-71. So, but you're right. The history in terms of where we are now, there are a lot of HBCU players coming out of the MEAC, coming out of the CIAA, as we see now. 4 of them out of those 2 conferences are going to be in the Super Bowl, none out of the SWAC.
It's just the way you said it, none out of the SWAC. But Lou, I rolled my eyes because I knew you was going to find some way to bring up your Steelers in this conversation. I was just waiting on it. I knew it was coming.
Yeah, well, you know, the good thing is, Symone, to really understand it, is the Steelers as well as the Kansas City Chiefs were the first ones really to employ a lot of HBCU players. And it was because of their 2 scouts. There was, with the Steelers, his name was, he was Radio Raheem's father, and his name escapes me. Bill. His father was the publisher of the Pittsburgh Courier, and he went to the Steelers and told them, "You're missing out by not drafting HBCU players." And he eventually did. They're gonna kill me because I can't think of his name right now. And then there was a similar guy for the Kansas City Chiefs. The Oakland Raiders were the 3rd team. Those were the 3 that really ushered HBCU players into the NFL. In fact, those are the 2 teams in the history of my rooting in the NFL. The Kansas City Chiefs and the Pittsburgh Steelers have been the 2 teams I've rooted for. So.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I was a big Chiefs fan. I was a big AFL fan.
A lot is being exposed right now.
Yeah, the AFL was the underdog. The AFL was the underdog to the NFL, and the
First
AFL
of all, it should have been us. We were one team at a time, Luke, the Steagles.
But look, they were recruiting and signing black college players when the NFL was drafting them in the 21st and 20 in the later rounds. The AFL came in and started drafting Buck Buchanan when he came out in the first round. They drafted all of these players in the first round and really forced the NFL AFL merger because they were competing and beating. Like when Joe Namath and the New York Jets defeated the Colts, the Namath had several HBCU players on his team. The Colts had, I think, 2, and the Jets had like 6. So that's just a part of the history in terms of that's why I rooted for Kansas City, because Kansas City had all those black players and particularly HBCU players.
Okay. I'm filing this away in my mental cabinet. I knew it was some bias going on here, Luke. And that's the past. We're talking about the present now, Luke. Your Steelers had a chance to lock up and keep Javon, the grave digger, Hargrave, and
Yes,
you
we
did.
did. Yes, we did. Yeah, we did. Yeah. And I blame the Steelers for that, even though, Mike Tomlin, a little bit of history here. Mike Tomlin's mother went to Virginia State in the CIAA. His father went to Hampton University in the CIAA. He considers himself a CIAA baby. Just file that one away. That's some
So
good
why
history.
didn't that CIAA baby take Josh Williams, a CIAA baby?
Well, we don't get a chance. We don't get a chance to pick very early. Joshua Williams went in the 4th round. By that time, and the history is that he's always had HBCU players on his roster. It's one of the things he's talked about before. In terms of the guys he looks to draft, whether you're able to get him or not is a big question. But we did draft Hargrave, and he deserved it because he was a beast in the MEAC for South Carolina State. So, but congratulations to you. You got him now. If we got any sense, we'll get him back.
Okay, I know you're gonna be rooting for the Chiefs, even though next week we're gonna do a full breakdown. Which team has more HBCU ties? And I already know on our coaching staff, we have some coaching staff hailing from HBCUs. We're gonna talk about that next week, and I bet you the Eagles are gonna have more HBCU ties than your little Chiefs.
I got some stuff for you, but we'll save it for next week. So we'll have something to cover next week. I got some stuff about people on the Chiefs staff now from HBCU ranks. I'll tell you about it. We'll do that next week.
Okay. I'm glad you love the Chiefs so much, Luke, because you know what? The Chiefs is a part of the reason your Steelers ain't making it out the AFC for a little while. So keep rooting for the Chiefs.
Leave my Steelers out of this. We'll be fine. We'll be back.
All right, you guys. This is the Super Bowl Part 1 edition of the HBCU NFL Report on HBCU Game Day. Next week, we're going to bring you guys more insight on the Chiefs and the Eagles and all of the HBCU storylines to watch in the Super Bowl. I am Symone. He is Luke Williams. Thank you guys so much for joining us.